Sophia PKA and Mata Hari were two of the most infamous honey traps in the history of espionage. Beautiful and seductive in equal measure, they used their charms to entrap legions of men. They were able to infiltrate the very highest circles of European society, affording them unprecedented access to the emperors, generals, and monarchs of the day. They then sold their secrets to the highest bidders, acting as multiple double agents. Two ladies playing a very dangerous game, who became the ultimate femme fatales.
Sophia PKA was one of the great enigmas of late 18th century, early 19th century Europe. But the great question is, was she also a spy?
This is a peasant who started in the potato fields and ends up at the end of her life in the palaces of Europe.
In my opinion, Mata Hari was guilty of absolutely nothing, except, unfortunately, being Mata Hari.
Was she an exotic dancer? Was she a stripper? Was she a prostitute? And I hate to say this, but I would think that she was probably all three.
The Germans recruited her as a spy. The British thought she was a spy. The French tried her as a spy. Now the question is, was she?
The view of women spies was one of the sexual vamp, the woman who used her sexuality to extract information.
If you can get the dirt on those individual men, then basically you've got them. You can control them. In a very real sense, knowledge is power.
Sophia PKA was born in 1760 in Turkey and raised in Constantinople with her sister. When her father, a local hat maker, died suddenly, her mother was forced to find a new benefactor for the family. So she took her two daughters to the Polish ambassador, who agreed to take them in.
It's thought that perhaps she took them to various embassies, try and sell them off, to the highest bidder, but certainly the Polish embassy was a good place to take them because someone who worked there was infamous for procuring prostitutes for the embassy and indeed the court. So basically they bought the two girls.
I think they possibly looked at Sophia and thought she was a product that could be used. And I mean that, it sounds nefarious, but what I actually mean is they probably looked at her and thought, well, we've got a young person here, she's beautiful. By all intents and purposes, she was stunning. So it would be easy to get her married off to somebody of importance or to take her around the social, the balls of Europe, around the courts of Europe, and say, oh, look at this beautiful woman, and then possibly turn her into a mistress of somebody that they want to be able to spy on. It's likely that she was taken by that government, trained to be a product and sent out into the world and says, go and do your thing.
Sophia marries a successful military commander, Count Joseph de Witt, and starts attending functions with him across Europe in the royal courts of Germany, Austria, and Italy. In 1781, she is presented to the Polish King Stanislaus Augustus in Warsaw, followed by King Frederick II of Prussia, and then Emperor Joseph II in Austria.
Amazing things happened to the obviously wildly charismatic Sophia. For example, she met the Austrian Emperor Joseph II, who was so taken with her. Obviously not just her beauty, he met hundreds of people, thousands of people a year, including wildly beautiful women, I should imagine. But he was so taken with her that he did two things. One was he got a little-known composer called Mozart to write her a special composition. The other thing was he wrote to his sister, Marie Antoinette, and said, you must meet this girl. She's amazing. And indeed, you know, it sounds like a fairy tale, but this is what happened. The two women did meet. Sophia went to Versailles, to the Petit Trianon, and met Marie Antoinette, and guess what? They became great buddies.
I mean, she was a beautiful woman being shown off to very famous people at the time. If you take Mozart, for example, he's the rock star of the time, right? Or the generals were the rock stars of the time. So she was thought of as an attractive groupie in a way, and that was a way of sort of latching her on to somebody famous.
Sophia then moves on to Paris, meeting and becoming friendly with Marie Antoinette, and spending time with her at her Petit Trianon theme park in Versailles. But like all her liaisons and acquaintances before her, it's likely that her ingratiation with the French court was part of a greater plan engineered by the Polish ambassador to gain access to people of real power and influence.
Let's not forget that Sophia and her sister were bought by the Poles, and they obviously would want a return for their money. I mean, not just in sexual favors. You know, they had these two streetwise girls, very young girls, but they weren't just beautiful. Sophia wasn't just beautiful. She was also very intelligent. And it must have occurred to them that they could have basically placed her in, well, virtually any influential man's bed.
She's getting her foot into the door into every royal society, every political society within the whole of Europe. Now, the best thing about that, if you've got your foot in the door, you have power, because you have knowledge, you have friends. And knowledge and influence is power at that time.
She certainly had the beauty, the charm, the wit, and the contacts. And she knew, quite clearly, she knew how to play men against each other. Her mindset also, I mean, she was a kid from the back streets. Basically, she had the mindset of somebody who'd do anything to survive.
Ian Rowland is a mentalist who has trained FBI agents in many of the mind-reading techniques employed in espionage. Techniques that Patoka may well have been trained in.
I suppose you could say there's a very fine line between seduction and espionage. When we look back at some of the stories of the more well-known spies, especially the female spies, I'm sometimes asked if this is something to do with cold reading techniques and so on, and there may have been a bit of overlap, but I think it's perhaps more relevant to talk about the techniques that we can use even today to encourage people to cooperate, to encourage people to feel that they want to communicate, they want to cooperate, they want to share information. And there are certain things that you can do that encourage people along that line, engender that kind of spirit of cooperation. And for all we know, some of these very well-known female spies may have been using a whole armory of those sorts of techniques. One of them, for example, is using as many different modalities of communication as possible. It's not just what you say, but also making physical contact. You know, a light brush of the hand on the arm can make a difference. It's submissive posturing and gestures, chin down, eyes up. This is submissive. It's like saying, I'm low status to you, you are high status, I give you respect, I give you high status, I give you that feeling of ego, which of course many men would find quite seductive. And knowing all of these different things that you put together can be bracketed as either good seduction or good espionage technique.
Ian agreed to demonstrate some of the skills that agents like Patoka would have used in order to coax information from a target. He asked an assistant to bring along a simple drawing they have made, and then seal it within a signed brown envelope. And then, using mental techniques taught to spies all over the world, he would try and work out what that drawing is of.
With your words, obviously, but not with your face, your reaction, anything. Some people find this process uncomfortable. If it feels uncomfortable at any stage, just say so and we can stop, okay? Okay. So what you drew was either representational or abstract. It could have just been an abstract shape. It could actually be something. It could actually, okay, so it's it's a thing. It's a real thing. Okay, the animal, vegetable, person, thing, place, transport. Could be one of the. It's either lives or it does not. It's either live or synthetic, artificial. You don't really want me to living. Okay, good. This is clear. And this means person, animal, nature, a plant, Plant or animal, plant or animal, plant or animal, plant or animal, plant, animal, plant, animal. It's an animal. Okay, so this could be wild, it could be domesticated, it could be a pet. It could be wild, it could be domesticated, it could be a pet. It could be wild, it could... Right, or you could play with it. Yes, I heard that. Fine. So, you may even have had one of these or known one. Well, it'll have these. It'll have one of those. It'll have these. It'll have something like this. It'll have, I don't know, maybe a tail. I don't know. And let's have a look what you did.
Me to try it.
Yeah, let's have a good look at this process. So it was inside a sealed envelope. Wow, you did give it a good burial.
Yeah, I did.
Okay. And we had... It's not perfect,
Okay.
but it was perfect enough, I think. It's close enough. We got this. Thank you very much indeed.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
By the turn of the 19th century, Sophia had traveled across most of Europe, leaving a trail of enchanted monarchs and royal courts in her wake. She was fiercely ambitious, a world-class networker, and she knew everyone. But was she also something more?
The big question is whether Sophia was a spy. Many people who were around at the time claimed that she was, without giving any evidence for it. But she certainly lived a life of somebody who could be an excellent spy. She was certainly excellently placed to be a spy. She had affairs with virtually everybody who was anybody, including Catherine the Great's minister and secret husband, Potemkin. Sophia knew everybody. She moved in all the great royal circles, all the great political circles of Europe. And also her sister had married into a great Turkish family. And the two sisters were said to be working together, exchanging intelligence on various movements of troops as various wars broke out. So it does seem that she was in the intelligence gathering business.
You have to understand that Sophia lived in a society and an age where sleeping with the enemy was the done thing. You're in a time of courtesans. Now, courtesans were trained in particular sexual techniques to please whoever they were with. Now, it would be very strange to think that Sophia was working for the Polish government, meeting all of these people and not doing the unspeakable spying side of stuff. It would be bizarre to think she wasn't doing this. So reading between the lines, we've got to assume that she was doing something with all the people that she was meeting.
A honey trap is using an attractive woman to bed someone, to bed a man in a position of power, and for fear of his wife finding out or his superiors finding out if it's not allowed in the profession he's in, he will be given a choice. We will tell your wife or you will start to provide intelligence for us. And often it's an easy calculation to make for the person who's been caught in the honey trap. And often the results can be very, very effective.
Having conquered Europe, Sophia moved on to Russia, where her target was the formidable Catherine the Great. Using her contacts and royal connections, she was easily able to get an audience with the Queen, who was, according to reports, very keen to meet this little beauty. They quickly hit it off. And Sophia became a close confidant to one of the most powerful and influential women on the planet.
There she was, this stunningly beautiful young girl, this dashing major. They lit up every room they went into. They were the talk of all the salons. They went to Berlin, they went to Russia, you name it. She was soon curtsying to Catherine the Great of Russia, and she became a friend of hers. I mean, how did that happen? This girl from the back streets of Constantinople She was a remarkable woman.
Sadly, her relationship with Catherine would be the last chapter in Sophia's remarkable life. She became increasingly unwell and mentally unstable, accusing the Polish Illuminati of messing with her brain. She died in Berlin in 1822, aged 62.
Sophia PKA is possibly one of the greatest spies in history. I would say the most forgotten about spy, which makes her the best, in my opinion. Because it's only recently that we suddenly put the jigsaw pieces together and we realize that this woman who was seeing everybody, all the crowned heads of Europe, all the rock stars of the time, and she's seeing all these people, and we realize that only now we realize, well, she must have been a spy, because you wouldn't have been doing that otherwise. You've come from nothing, you end up being this fantastic film star of the time. So to me, she's the one that's going to go down in history as one of the greatest spies who ever lived.
Well, if Sophia PKA was a spy, she was certainly in the right place and at the right time. She made sure she was. It's impossible to say definitely, but given that there were all these rumors of her spying, and given how she operated, just simply how she played men off against each other, how she used her beauty, how she used her native intelligence and her charm, almost certainly it involved a lot of pillow talk, it involved a lot of flattery. I mean, she was probably one of the world's best female psychologists when it came to playing men.
Half a century after PKA's death, a young girl called Margarita Zell was born in Holland in 1876. Like Sophia, at an early age, Mata Hari, as she became known, decided that sexuality was her ticket to a better life. So in the mid-1890s, she boldly answered a newspaper ad seeking a bride for Rudolf MacLeod, a military captain based in the Dutch East Indies. The marriage didn't work out, and in her early 20s, she found herself divorced, homeless, and broke.
Mata Hari's real name was Margarita Zeller. She was Dutch, born in Amsterdam, married an officer called MacLeod, and moved to Java. Had 2 children, was one for the men, to say the least, and was extremely interested in most of his fellow officers in the officers' mess. He wasn't too happy about it. Their son died while they were out there. She came back to Holland and he divorced her and threw her out. And she moved to Paris and became, for want of a better word, an exotic dancer.
A very exotic dancer. She became the talk of Paris. Her speciality was a sort of striptease in which she would get down to a sort of jeweled bra and very little else. Well, maybe a few strategically placed other gems. Everything about her was invented. She invented the name Mata Hari, which means eye of the day or eye of the dawn. She claimed to, that she was a princess from the East, and of course she wasn't. And the interesting thing was that she wasn't even beautiful. You look at pictures of her now and think, what? But she had that essence of sexuality. She was a very sexy woman. She knew how to project her image. She knew how to create an image. And she certainly knew how to play men.
Now, she's not a very good dancer, but she's doing routines that she saw in Java and the Javanese dancers out there, and she's doing movements that no one had ever seen before. And so you think, well, perhaps that's what people went to see. But in reality, she went because she was a nude dancer wearing nothing but a jeweled bra.
Promiscuous, flirtatious, and openly flaunting her body, Mata Hari became something of a sensation in the salons and clubs of Parisian high society. Dressed in ornately jeweled tunics and midriff-revealing tops, she performed various exotic dances and striptease acts that she said she'd learned in the harems of the Maharajas in India. She quickly gathered a loyal group of wealthy and influential male patrons.
Basically, she loved men. She loved the attention of men, and becoming this extremely risque dancer. I mean, in those days, most women, apart from in the Folie Bergère, and all they did was really showed off their frilly knickers, but she literally showed off almost the whole of her body, apart from her breasts, of course, which she was rather embarrassed about, and she had sort of like a brass bra that she kept on. But she was into men in a big way, and especially rich men.
It's hard to say whether she was good looking by conventional standards. She had an unusual appearance. She wasn't ugly, I'm not saying that, but she wasn't what we would call a stunning model type look. She was slightly interesting, and I think that mixed with the exotic dancing that she did, and she created an entire history for herself, a brand new history, started her life again. When she'd lost everything, she said, right, this is what I'm gonna do. And she became a Javanese princess who did exotic dancing in the nude, as far as everyone knew. Now that made her attractive.
She had this extraordinary stage show of herself dancing, often semi-nude and with extraordinary performance, which she said was modelled on the Javanese dancing that she had seen during her period in Java, as she was probably the highest paid performer of her time. And really, there wasn't much else going on that was like that. People either loved her or they were profoundly shocked by her.
At the start of World War I in 1914, Mata Hari was said to have been recruited into the German Secret Service by one of her lovers, Berlin's chief of police. She continued giving risque dance performances across Europe, but all the while secretly transmitting intelligence reports to her German handlers.
Mata Hari had a penchant for soldiers, particularly officers, and any woman that's going to be sleeping with a lot of officers is going to arise suspicion. Because she was from the Netherlands, when war broke out, she's not French, she's not German, she's not British. She can sleep with any of them, and it's not a problem because she is neutral. And that's what allowed her to go between all the countries. She was never stopped or anything because she wasn't in the war, she wasn't included. So if she slept with a German general, well, that's not a problem. Or if she slept with some French general, it's not a problem. So you just assume that she must be spying for somebody at some point. And eventually, she was bought by the Germans because she ran out of money. Basically, she was asking for money. This general goes, all right, I'll give you a load of cash if you spy for us. She then takes the cash, goes off again on holiday around Europe and has a great time. Comes back to the Germans and just says, ran out of money, can I have some more money? And they said, no, because you're a rubbish spy. They actually turned to her and just said, you're so bad, we don't want you, unless we will only give you money if you go to spy school for us in Germany. And so she was shipped off to Germany and ended up actually for a week or so being trained in some spy seminar on what she should actually be doing for her money.
Was she an exotic dancer? Was she a stripper? Was she a prostitute? I would think that she was extremely fond not only of men, but of money and of power. And I hate to say this, but I would think that she was probably all three.
I think you have to consider what the context was of the time. She was an exotic dancer. She was unusual. She was very public. She was also having a string of affairs with politicians, businessmen, and very high-ranking military officials, including German military personnel. And by 1915, Britain certainly had her under surveillance. Her behaviour was such that it drew attention. It drew the attention of the intelligence services to her.
So she might not just have been an agent for the Germans. She might have been a double agent or a triple agent or however many agencies she worked for. She might have even lost track herself, basically. But of course, that is an extraordinarily difficult and dangerous game to play. And she found out it was no game at all.
Such were the dangers that she faced. It was known that Mata Hari carried a number of exotic firearms that she'd had made especially for her, and that could be concealed in her purses or on her person as everyday objects. John Baker, from Baptiste Armourers in London, has a working collection of some similar weapons from the period.
This is what looks, to all intents and purposes, as an umbrella. It actually operates like an umbrella. It opens up. Hope you don't get any bad luck. But in actual fact, it's a firearm. It's actually a disguised firearm. It's like a shotgun, and it fires a shotgun cartridge. If I open it up and show you, you can see here, there's the chamber. There is a cartridge. The cartridge loads into the chamber, and we load it and fire it. If we move along then we've got various other small disguised weapons. We'll start at this end. This is more cowboy period. This is a little small .22 Derringer revolver. Again, very easily concealable in the pocket, in your hand. You can't see it. When you need it, it's there. To load it, it's very simply that you load it from that end. You can put a couple of cartridges in. I'll just put one in for just now to show you. Closes up, loads. Quite happy, quite hide, you know. When you need it, cock it back and fire it. It's the sort of thing that you could seal very easily amongst your clothing, in a bag, in a suitcase, in a purse even, if you're a woman, or in your pocket, you know. Very easily concealable. Nice small gun. Doesn't have to be very big to do the job. Then we have what's known as a little purse pistol. Here it is. It looks like a little purse. Lady might carry it in her handbag. This one, if you open it up, conceals a squeeze gun. This one, you actually squeeze at the back, like so, to make it operate, and you would hold it. Magazine would hold about 4 or 5 rounds in it, and as you squeezed it, it would load and fire and eject, okay, just like a normal thing. Again, another nice little spy gun type thing if you want. Again, could be concealed in your pocket, doesn't have to be in the purse. But it's the sort of thing that would use for close protection, something at point blank range when you really had to. You couldn't run away, and you had to stand and fight. Something like that. This particular one, it's quite an interesting one. This is actually a pen, and you can sometimes write with these. I think you can just see it on my hand there. You see it actually got a bit of ink in it. But this is actually a .22 spy pen gun, the sort of thing that might be used by Soviet or American or British spies. It's a very simple device. What we do is we unscrew the end, take away the actual writing implement, which is that bit, which comes out. That's also the rammer for getting rid of the empty case, which I'll show you in a minute. We then unscrew the rest of the barrel. That bit is the barrel. We can load a .22 cartridge, which would go into it like so. I want to actually put this one in, because the live cartridge will eject that. Again, the ejector. Check that out. If we put the cartridge in, we load it. Like so. And to fire it, it's very simple. We simply pull back and let it go, and it will fire. That easy. Sort of thing that, again, only a spy would use. You couldn't buy these. These are specially made. This is the sort of thing that is ideal for using in the espionage game. Absolutely perfect. That's what. This is something for a woman. Someone like Mata Hari, definitely she might have had something like this. This, to all intents and purposes, looks like a lipstick, very simple lipstick. It's actual fact a firearm, disguised firearm. I take the cover off, looks like a lipstick. It would have a little piece of lipstick on the end that a woman could do her mouth, but in actual fact it's a firearm. If we unscrew it, it would take in there a little .22 or a .38 perhaps, depending on what they're made for. They're specifically made for a spy. And then to fire it, you'd simply point, pull it back, and let go. Messy, I would have thought. Bits of lipstick everywhere. But again, very simple, very effective.
The likelihood is that Mata Hari lived in a society where people would carry weapons around with them. Most people would possibly be carrying a knife anyway. I mean, people would use them as part of their jobs and so on like that. But there is a massive collection of weapons specifically made for women. Little dainty guns, little knives that could be concealed. And if you go back slightly further, the Victorian era, you're looking at most men carrying some form of weapon with them. There'd be a walking cane with a stick in the handle. There's some great examples of walking stick guns where the entire stick is a rifle itself. So it would be highly likely that she's carrying around some form of weapon. Now, in today's society, that seems strange. But back then, that would be a normal thing to carry around, a little tiny derringer that's tucked away somewhere, attached to your glove, up your sleeve, tucked down your sock. It's not unheard of for those people to be carrying such weapons.
She was ruthless. We believe she carried a small pistol in her handbag. And I'm convinced that she would use it if necessary. I would think she probably did use it. This woman was as ruthless as James Bond.
Eventually, Mata Hari's luck ran out, and in early 1916, she was traveling from Spain to England by boat when she was picked up by the police and taken to London for questioning, suspected of being a German agent.
Basically, the whole of Europe believed she was a spy. The French, the Germans, definitely the British, all believed she was a spy. And they all, for want of a better word, wanted to get her. Unfortunately, she made a bit of a mistake, and she actually ended up in Plymouth. And the British Intelligence Service were waiting for her. They arrested her. Took her for questioning. I believe reasonably brutal questioning as well. But they couldn't get her to crack. They actually didn't have anything on her. And I sometimes wonder if anybody ever did really have anything on her.
We know your papers are rubbish. We know you didn't plan to come to England. Tell us who have you been talking to. Tell us what you've been saying. We know everything else. Just want to hear you say it.
I don't think it's credible that she was having meetings with all of these military leaders, sleeping with them, coochie-cooing with them, spending time with them, taking their money and information, passing it on to the Germans, and not knowing what she was doing. I mean, by any other name, that is being a spy.
I think that she was, for want of a better word, a money-grabbing nymphomaniac that was surrounded by rich, influential men, which she loved. But she then, I think, realised the fact that we were approaching World War I, that she realised that she could put her talents, for want of a better word, to greater use as a spy.
On February 12th, you were seen meeting with the German attaché in Madrid. Why would you be meeting with him?
Like I said, he's an old friend.
Oh, he's an old friend. Go on, tell us, what did you say to him?
Mata Hari basically did not respect men. Like a lot of prostitutes or courtesans, men were seen as suckers, people who paid the bills, people to be flattered and wheedled and seduced, but never loved. This was never about love. It was never even perhaps about desire. It was about power.
Come on, you're gonna tell us. Who is it? Who are those people? And what have you been selling? Come on, you need to tell us now. Tell me now. Are you listening to me?
How can I tell you what I don't know?
Miss Zell, you seem to do a lot of travelling. You flit backwards and forwards, France, Spain, maybe even Germany, who knows? How can you explain all that?
They wanted to know why she travelled to all these capital cities all around Europe. They wanted to know why she kept the company of diplomats, soldiers, officers, naval attachés. They wanted to know why she amassed so much money. And She never broke. Her answers were, I'm a dancer. It's my profession. I travel, and I get paid very well.
We know the money that you have in your accounts. Where are you getting the money from? Who are you speaking to? What are you telling them?
I said nothing.
It actually sent them bonkers because everything that she was doing, traveling as she did, being paid exorbitant amount of money, was a blueprint for a spy. But they couldn't break her.
Certainly, the British authorities were finding spies, as it happens, non-spies most of the time, all over the place. So yes, Mata Hari stands out. She's unusual, she's sexual, she's exotic, and she hangs out with military personnel. To be fair to Mata Hari, of all countries, I think she was an extremely apolitical and naive individual who just did not realise what sort of danger she was in.
Mata Hari was eventually released, as the British had no evidence to charge her with. But they were convinced that she was a spy, and just 1 month later she was arrested in her room at the Hotel Elysée in Paris. As she was being taken into custody, she said that she was working for the head of French intelligence, a man called Ladau.
They thought she was a German spy called Clara Bendix. They accused her of this. This is before she was actually imprisoned. And they claimed that she had been trained professionally at the German spy school in Antwerp, which did exist. She categorically denied this, absolutely denied that she was, and said that not only was she not a German spy, she had actually been working for Ladau, who had recruited her to work for France. Ladau, meanwhile, completely denies this meeting has ever happened, completely denies that he's given her any money, and completely denies that she's doing anything for France at all.
The only evidence they've got that they use against her at her arrest is that she's got invisible ink in her boudoir. Now, she claims it's for use as part of makeup and stuff like this, but in reality, having invisible ink was actually an offence at the time, because the only people who would have this stuff would be spies. So that to them was the sum total of their evidence against her. The trial itself was a complete farce. Her defence lawyer wasn't even allowed to cross-examine the witnesses, not even the witnesses they supplied. The witnesses for the defence weren't allowed to be cross-examined. It was a foregone conclusion that she was going to be found guilty. She was not allowed to walk out of that court as an innocent woman.
In July 1916, Mata Hari was put on trial in Paris and sentenced to death for spying against France. Later that winter, on October the 15th, she was executed by a firing squad.
She was interrogated and tried and imprisoned in Paris and sentenced to be shot as a spy. She petitioned the French president for clemency, and she genuinely believed that she would actually be reprieved. And then on the morning of October the 15th, 1917, she was in a prison cell, asleep, and two Sisters of Mercy, a priest and her lawyer, came into a prison cell at about 5:30 in the morning and told her that it was time.
Her death was a theatrical performance, the best thing she'd ever done. She was woken up just before dawn, and she, typical perhaps of her, she essentially went to her death wearing high-heeled slippers and a nightie. But even though over the top of the nightie she was wearing a silken kimono and a black fur-trimmed cloak with a big black hat and long black gloves.
She stood in front of the firing squad and was offered a blindfold. Her solicitor was still with her, and she said to him, "Do I have to have this?" And he asked the officer in charge, and they said, if she doesn't want it, then she doesn't have to wear one. The firing squad stood to attention, raised their rifles, and aimed at her heart. And they fired. She sank to her knees, still staring at the firing squad, and then fell backwards with her eyes staring at the sky. An officer and an NCO went over to her, and the NCO took out of his holster a pistol, pointed it at the left-hand side of her brain and pulled the trigger. And Mata Hari was definitely, at that point, dead.
It's a tragic but telling footnote to the life of Mata Hari that her career as a spy faded rapidly as she got older and lost the sheen of her beauty and youth. But in her prime, she was a shining example of a honey trap, a female agent who could prize confidential information out of the great and the good in return for favors. A practice that is as relevant today as it was then.
So was Mata Hari really a spy, or just was she a confused good time girl who didn't realise what she was getting herself into? The jury is largely out, but personally, I think she was a spy.
By the time she was actually executed in 1917, we're pretty sure the British thought she was a spy. In fact, everybody in Europe was thinking she was a spy. Something about her was going, we think she's a spy. Now, in my opinion, I think she just enjoyed thinking of herself as a spy. She enjoyed that life. She enjoyed getting the money from here. She enjoyed the covert thing of going over there and spying on this person, meeting that man. And particularly as her early life was so appalling, to suddenly turn into something that was exciting was a great enjoyment to her. Unfortunately, I don't think she ever realised that being a spy was a dangerous game.
One of the problems with Mata Hari is there are so many myths. There are so many conflicting stories, and she contributed to this. It's very, very hard to know what the truth actually was. But in the 1920s, as early as the 1920s, German counter-espionage stated categorically that they had no evidence whatsoever to prove that she had been a spy. They had no evidence. And in the 1930s, late 1930s, French intelligence said they also had absolutely no evidence that she had ever been a spy.